Hello and welcome back to the World Championship in Through the Ages. After the two 4-player games are finished, I think I had a solid start. I have 7 points out of 2 games. I'm 2 points behind Gandin, but he has already 1 game finished more. And the game that we are taking a look at today is the first one of the 3-player games against Cogito and Fjantarik, so the 2 players that are at the moment behind me. If I should manage to win this game, I could really keep those two players on distance and also manage to be ahead on Gandin with 3 games finished. On the other hand, of course, for Cogito and Fjantarik, it could be a very important game to win to keep good chances in the run for the first place. So that should be an exciting game. In general, the standings are quite close at the moment. And now without further ado, let's take a look at the game. In this game I am playing in the 2nd position, and first of all we can take a look at the leaders and wonders. There's definitely some lab synergy in H3 with Sid Meier and Bill Gates. There's also spaceflight. Then we have some theater synergy with Chaplin, Fleming and also the Hollywood being there. We have the Red Cross, which is always interesting to note. We have Gandhi and Churchill for the military. Also Marie Curie, of course, as a lab leader. Then in H2 we have the Ocean Liner Service, but no Maria Theresa. We have James Cook, but no Suez Canal, importantly. We have 2 military action leaders with Napoleon and Catherine. We have Anthony Gaudi and Shakespeare, some cultural leaders, and then James Watt together with the railroad. In H1 we have the 2 science wonders with Universitas and Silk Road. The Machu Picchu is there, also St. Peter's Basilica. Both of those wonders maybe work nicely together with Michelangelo. We have no military action leader in H1, interestingly. There's Barbarossa, Genghis Khan and Nostradamus to help with the strength. We have Saladin as a very strong leader. Isabella without a lot of colonization synergy, maybe a little more of a mediocre leader. And then Gutenberg for some lab and printing press synergy. Fjantarik is in the 1st position and he just takes Hammurabi. And then for me it was relatively clear that I want to take the stockpile plus one of those wonders. Of course I could, for example, just take Homer. There is a library that could be revealed, but if it isn't revealed and then maybe the Stonehenge is taken away by Fjantarik, I think that would just not be worth it to take then just Homer, and also a bit risky. And then the question here is basically, which wonder do I want to take? Do I want to take the Acropolis or do I want to take the Colossus? There's no Suez Canal in the game, which makes the Colossus a little bit more weak for me. And so I thought about, do I maybe just want to go for the Acropolis? It just feels a little bit safer for me if I go for this wonder because it has some basic cultural productions. It will for certain generate some value. You at some point definitely will go for a government form, so it's just with the Acropolis it's very cheap, you build it and you will get something out of it and you don't have to be too much concerned about it. With the Colossus you have to put some work into it to make it work, and if there's no Suez Canal in there it can be a bit tricky, but here I nonetheless went with the Colossus. And I think the reason is that, or one very big reason was that I thought at my next turn I have some very good chances to actually get Sun Tzu. Maybe also Mare could still be available, but it's definitely possible that Cogito now will go for the other wonder that I don't take and then maybe just take Sumer, which would be a solid start. Maybe we'll also go for a yellow card instead or something completely different, but I thought it could be likely. And then Sun Tzu is the only leader that I know of that he will be available for me guaranteed. There could be some other ones. Confucius, Boudica could maybe be interesting, but Sun Tzu is the only one available for certain. And with having Sun Tzu and Colossus, there's definitely the potential to set up maybe for a little bit of a strength push. Fjantarik has Hammurabi, so it could be nice to maybe make him a little bit afraid and force him into an uncomfortable position. There's also Genghis Khan, Barbarossa, who maybe work nicely with Sun Tzu and Colossus, so I thought the Colossus has some potential here, and I thought it should be the better choice, but of course now I have to put some work into it to also get some value out of it. Cogito makes the decision to indeed go for Homer on the Acropolis. That should be a solid start. Now Stonehenge and Engineering Genius, they both in 2 civil actions, which is nice. Fjantarik has Hammurabi though and can maybe relatively easily at least take one of those cards. He makes the decision to, instead of the Stonehenge, going for the Engineering Genius, which I think makes a lot of sense because the library is coming down the row. Both I and Cogito have already a wonder, so I think it makes a lot of sense to take the Engineering Genius here and then wait for the library to come down the row, maybe also with the hopes of something like an early Universitas or Silk Road potentially being revealed. Now it is my turn, and I again had to think about, do I really want to commit to the strength game? Some parts of my Some part of me, with me maybe being a bit more of an economy-focused player, definitely thought about maybe just going for Confucius. Also maybe getting some value out of the Colossus because the event deck will flip very quickly, but also just getting some safe signs out of Confucius. But I do think it is a disadvantage if you are maybe too much leaning in towards a specific playstyle. I do think the Sensu Colossus combination against Hammurabi can do some very nice work, and if I shouldn't be willing to pay an additional civil action here just to maybe get into a position where I'm a bit more comfortable. I do think I have to get more comfortable also with going for some of those strength pushes, otherwise I have some weaknesses in my gameplay. And so even though I was definitely tempted about maybe going for a bit more of a safe pick with Confucius, I do think I have to go for Sansu here, a leader that I maybe in general should try out a little bit more often, as I think maybe I have for some time undervalued him a little bit. So I went for Sansu here. Also, there is one reason why I was hoping, or which I was another reason why I think it might be nice to go for Sansu here, because if I go for Confucius, I take one card from the row. Now that I take Sansu, I take him from the discard spot, meaning that a library will move to this spot. And then if Cogito at his turn, he probably just goes for some normal stuff, electing Homer, building a mine, increasing his population. And then I was hoping that maybe he will be willing to take the frugality over the urban growth and let the library stay on 2 civil actions for Fjantarik. If he does that, then me taking Confucius would, or if he is willing to do it, then me taking Confucius would take the option away to maybe let the library stay on 2 civil actions for Fjantarik. Also the alchemy stays on 3 for Cogito, so he doesn't have the option to maybe already get something interesting for his economy for 2 civil actions. So I just go for Sansu, build a mine and increase my population. I draw a bunch of cards, one event, one strength event, so that is definitely nice to see it with me having Sansu and Colossus. Cogito builds a mine, increases his population, goes for Homer, and now said I was kind of really hoping that he will go for the frugality, because now there's not only library in the row, there's also Nostradamus coming down the row, and I thought both of those cards could be quite nice to have for Fjantarik. Nostradamus could help him a lot, maybe not being too vulnerable to a potential strength push from me, and so I was hoping that Cogito might take the frugality here. Sadly, he was not willing to take the frugality, takes the urban growth. Maybe it could be a mistake, but maybe he also thought that he is fine with Fjantarik now getting Nostradamus, but I do think it makes Fjantarik's turn quite a bit more pleasant, so I was a bit unhappy that he didn't take the frugality here. Fjantarik will take the library, builds 2 stages, and then is willing to take Nostradamus, which I think makes a lot of sense with playing against Sansu and Colossus. Now it is my turn, and I have one event in hand that I want to push. The event revealed is the development of markets, and I will take the additional resources. It could be nice to maybe potentially be able to finish the Colossus relatively quickly. Also, I will take the alchemy this turn. If the others don't see it at all, there might be a bit of time until the event deck will flip, and then it could be nice to maybe get some economical value going before then at some point trying to build up some nice strength. I have this heavy cavalry tactic in hand. And one card that I also definitely wanted to take is this Copy of Knights. It just enables me to maybe improve some very nice tactics. And also maybe I can actually manage to build a 3 knights and upgrade this medieval army tactic, which will be a tactic that's difficult to copy for the opponent. So that's always nice with Sansu if you find a way to improve a tactic that the others can't use that easily. There is, however, also Genghis Khan in the game, so with having him in mind, it could be an idea to maybe already commit to the swordsman. But first of all, I have also a chance to maybe draw something like medieval army tactic that I could improve with the knights. And second of all, there is Barbarossa in the game, and especially with him I thought maybe I have a realistic chance to get a heavy cavalry the normal way, so I rather took the knights here instead of the swordsman. And then after taking the knights, I also went with the alchemy, just because I will have the ability to upgrade it to it next turn if the others don't see it. I might have the time to get at least 1, maybe even 2 upgrades in before I really need to finish the Colossus and want to set up some strength, which could still be nice. It's of course a little bit of a deviation from the potential strength push that I'm maybe aiming towards, but Fjantarik has this early Nostradamus. I thought I should maybe not be too heavily leaning towards that direction of play, and setting a bit up of science production up could still be quite valuable. I keep the tactic in the colonization card. I again draw 1 big strength event, the Uncertain Borders. Cogito seeds and opens the development of agriculture. And he will build the 2nd lab, increases his population, takes the swordsman and the rich land. Swordsman might allow him to very nicely use the additional resource from Homer. Sadly, with taking those 2 cards, the Iron will fall down to 1 civil action for Fjantarik, but he has a lot of nice stuff, so he will then at the end take the Monarchy and the Iron, but at least maybe with taking the Iron, he doesn't have as clean of a Monarchy Revolution at the next turn, which could have been very strong. Now it is my turn. At least one opponent seeded an event. I again want to push a strength event with my the additional with having Colossus and Sansu, and then the event revealed is the development of Civil Life. As you can see, I actually made a decision to use it to increase my population, saving 1 food. I could have also used it to develop the alchemy, and I do think getting an additional science could be quite valuable, as I have neither a wonder nor a leader that gives me additional science, so that was, I think, my first instinct to go for that. But there is a little bit of an issue with it, and it has to do something with Barbarossa, who is coming down the row. I thought Barbarossa could be a very strong leader for me, maybe allowing me to set up this medieval army, this heavy cavalry tactic, especially now that I missed out on the first copy of Swordsman and I have already some knights in hand. I do think it would be a lot more clean to just build this normally instead of using Genghis Khan. And I have now a bunch of food saved up. If I don't use the development of Civil Life and instead go for the alchemy, I can go for 1 alchemy upgrade. I can increase my population once, however that is not enough to get me out of corruption. I don't want to build a warrior to get out of corruption, meaning I would need to increase my population again, but with increasing my population 2 times normally, I really don't have that much food left after having done this, meaning that Barbarossa is just not that nice for me. However, now at least I 1 time increased my population with the development of Civil Life, so I have a bit more food saved up after going for 1 upgrade and increasing my population once normally. So I used the development of Civil Life to increase population instead of developing the alchemy to have a bit more food saved up for Barbarossa. The question is, of course, will I even have the chance to get Barbarossa at the next turn? There's definitely the possibility that Cogito will go for him. He is Homer, getting a leader at some point could be nice. However, it's maybe a bit annoying to go for Barbarossa for him, because he has the development of Civil Life revealed. If he uses it to increase his population, then he really doesn't have a lot of food left, which makes Barbarossa weak. But if he, for example, uses it to develop the Swordsman and then doesn't increase his population, he could maybe just finish the Acropolis and take Barbarossa in hand, but there's also a breakthrough in the row that he will be able to take for 1 civil action, so I was hoping that there's a reasonable chance that I might get Barbarossa at my next turn. Then, as there's still a little bit of time left until the event deck will be flipped, I made a decision to actually go for the alchemy this turn. I can go for 1 upgrade. I have to increase my population to get out of corruption, and 1 card that I also definitely wanted to take is this Engineering Genius. I can just very nicely use it in the Colossus. It guarantees me to be able to finish the Colossus at the next turn. I guess also with the stockpile it would already be guaranteed, but it's just very clean getting this card for 1 civil action and then very quickly afterwards being able to use it. And then with my last civil action, I have to increase my population to get out of corruption. I could have maybe considered the reserves instead of the Engineering Genius, because it maybe works nicely with Barbarossa, but it's just a lot more clean getting the Engineering Genius. Now with having 3 food saved up, also still having a stockpile in hand, I should easily be able to go for 2 Barbarossa activations, and depending on the development, maybe even a 3rd one. Also, I draw another strength event of Array, so maybe I can also still have a chance to get that one in the next stack, and if I then manage to be the strongest, I will at least get quite some nice value out of those H1 events, and then maybe also already it got rewarded me going for Sansu plus this Colossus. Cogito this turn will develop the Swordsman with the development of Civil Life, will increase his population once normally, indicating that he won't go for Barbarossa this turn. He instead wants to use Homer's resources and then takes the breakthrough, the Monarchy, which he then can develop for cheaper with the Acropolis. So that looks like a very clean turn, and taking Barbarossa here was probably just a bit too costly. However, I was happy to see it, as I was thinking that Barbarossa will be a nice leader for me. Fjantarik doesn't have the cleanest Monarchy Revolution, but is still willing to go for it. He can develop the Iron as well with the development of Civil Life, and he is still able to get out of corruption. Has to build a warrior for it, but maybe he needs some additional strength soon anyway, so he has now very cheaply the Monarchy going as the 3rd military action for Nostradamus, can even hold more cards in hand thanks to the library, and can now maybe start some iron production, and thanks to Nostradamus is not that much in trouble from me increasing my strength. However, if I go for the heavy cavalry tactic and finish the Colossus, then I definitely have an amount of strength where he has to at least build some more military to be safe. I seed the Foray into the deck and the development of Settlement is revealed. This turn I want to get stronger, so that there isn't the danger that I get hit by one of my own strength events before my next turn. I will finish the Colossus with the Engineering Genius. I think now it's a nice time to do it. That also already gets me out of corruption. I then make the decision to take Barbarossa in hand. However, I don't want to elect him yet, because the units that I want to build with him are knights for the heavy cavalry tactic, so there's no point in electing him. And with wanting to go for some Barbarossa activations at the next turn, I also really can't increase my population as my last civil action. I can't play the stockpile as I would have corruption. I don't have enough resource to go for an alchemy upgrade, so I basically had to take another card from the row. And I do think all cards could be considered here, apart of course from the wonder that costs 2 civil actions. The Code of Laws is just of course a nice technology to have. I have some additional science production with the alchemy set up relatively early, and maybe at some point it could help me getting a 5th civil action going. However, it is always a bit of a luxury to go for Code of Laws. I will go into Knights, I maybe want to go for some more upgrades, and so I thought, yeah, maybe it's just not something that I will go for in the near future. A card that could maybe be more interesting is the Irrigation, because especially with having Barbarossa, going for some irrigation upgrades could allow going for some additional activations, and could help me a lot to set up the heavy cavalry tactic, maybe even 1 or 2 more knights, who knows, even maybe a second heavy cavalry tactic could not be impossible if I maybe find a nice happy phase solution. So I do think the Irrigation is a nice card to consider here. It's also the last copy, so if I don't take one now, it will be gone. There's also the Ocean Liner service in the game, so maybe I should have gone for the Irrigation. But maybe if you remember the 10-headed Hydra video, you might remember that I value it quite highly to have an additional military action when having the Colossus. In the 10-headed Hydra, I was one of the few players who really prioritized getting into warfare, which at the end wasn't selected. And so at the end I actually made the decision to go for the warfare here. Because with going for this improved heavy cavalry tactic with Barbarossa, plus having the Colossus, I definitely have some strength potential. I will get the Colossus draws. There might be a chance to get an early H2 war. There might be a chance to get an early H2 aggression. Generally, it might be nice to be able to hold some more cards in hand. And I have the science to go quickly into Knights in warfare, and it could just make myself relatively threatening. Fjantarik sadly has 3 military action with Nostradamus. Cogito has the Acropolis, Swordsman already will soon also have 3 military actions. I was not too confident whether my strength push will be enough to maybe actually pull an aggression off, but it might still maybe lead to my opponents having to invest more into the military than they want to, and I can at least build my military very efficiently with Barbarossa. At least for the most part. I might have to build a 3rd knight normally instead of using Barbarossa, so I was willing to go for the warfare here, but I do think the Irrigation could also be a very fine card to take, but then I would stay on 2 military actions and don't have the option to get an additional strength out of the warfare, so there are some downsides if I go for the Irrigation here, but of course with Barbarossa that could also be an interesting thing, and those 2 things I valued more highly than the Code of Laws here. I revealed the heavy cavalry tactic already, actually to keep the plunder in hand, as it would be bad if I actually managed to build a threatening amount of strength. My opponents are vulnerable to an aggression, but I don't have one to execute it. I do get a bit punished here because I draw 2 new aggressions but no event to push. However, Cogito gets stronger anyway, meaning that maybe I don't want to push during my turn anyway. Cogito makes an interesting decision here. He is actually willing to pay 3 civil actions for the Universitas. And it's interesting in that regard that it is somewhat costly, doesn't have the most resource saved up, so it will take quite a while until it can be finished. But I think Cogito values the Universitas very highly, and one issue, for example, to an alternative turn could be to maybe take iron. Problem is, he has some hand space issues. He can't really get rid of the Richland very easily unless he wants to commit to an additional farmer mine, which could be a bit questionable. And then maybe he could do something like take iron, build an additional farm, take Richland. Maybe that could be fine, but it is a bit clunky with his hand space issues. Going into iron also delays his monarchy even more. Maybe he needs the 3rd military action to defend himself. He knows now that I revealed the heavy cavalry tactic. He definitely can foresee that soon with Barbarossa I have one tactic going, and then the 3rd military action from the monarchy is mandatory, meaning he can't go into iron quickly anyway. So he just skips the iron, meaning that the iron will be discarded on Fjantarik's turn, and both I and Cogito will be operating on bronze mines for a while longer. And then Cogito reveals the fighting band tactic, even going up to 7 strength. With Homer he can upgrade at the next turn 1 more warrior to swordsman for free. Fjantarik starts his iron upgrades, increases his population, takes the Code of Laws, allowing him to be on 6 instead of only 5 civil actions going into H2, and then he also picks the swordsman to have a way to generate some more strength. Now this is my turn. I definitely don't want to push, or actually no, I don't have the option to push, but I'm would also be the weakest, but of course the event deck hasn't flipped. I think I mixed this up with the following turn. This turn I can't really use my politics phase because I don't have any cards for it. I will go for Barbarossa, meaning the heavy cavalry tactic will be the one upgraded. I will develop the knights, and then I can go for 2 Barbarossa activations immediately. I want to increase my strength. I don't want to be at any risk that maybe both of my opponents see it and I get hit by a strength event. Sadly, I can't really get stronger than Cogito, meaning there is maybe a chance that Cogito seeds Fjantarik with Nostradamus, maybe would be willing to seed even while being the weakest, and then there could maybe be already an event revealed where then at least I'm not the strongest, like the uncertain borders, or maybe I lose 1 civil action to the call to arms. So I was a bit worried about it, but I can't really do anything about it. And then it was a little bit tricky for me on how to use the last 3 military actions here. Because I can of course take some cards in hand, I could take some frugalities, but at the moment looks like my food is spent. At some point there will be the fray, but then I maybe have 4 food, I use the frugality and then I'm stuck at 2 food. So I think the frugalities are not really that nice. There's a drama. There's not the biggest synergy. There's Anthony Gaudi, maybe Shakespeare, there's the Hollywood and Chaplin, so some synergy, but no Bach, no Marlene, and I have to be a bit careful. I'm operating on 4 civil actions. The Code of Laws and monarchies are taken away, so I might be operating on 4 civil actions a bit longer. And the question is also what to do after taking the drama. I could take the drama in hand, play the stockpile, and what to do afterwards. It's a bit tricky. I could maybe take the masonry, but it's also a bit costly for 2, and I might rather want to save my science to get into a government form potentially if I go for something like that. Also, the age might end before my next turn, so 1 civil action could of course be to play the stockpile. However, as the food might be lying around anyway, I thought maybe it's not too important, as the stockpile might only give me 1 resource. On the other hand, there is the foray coming, and if I take some food with it, it could allow for an additional Barbarossa activation. And of course, if I have 1 more food thanks to the stockpile, I have to take 1 less food from the foray to allow the Barbarossa activation, which means that playing the stockpile now could potentially translate still in some very nice value. So I do think that's one thing that I definitely want to do. And then I made an interesting decision here, because I actually, after playing the stockpile, went for the Theocracy. I also considered the St. Peter's Basilica, but there's an ocean liner service that I don't want to block myself from, also in Harvard College, so with me being on low resource production, I didn't want to take this project of the St. Peter's Basilica under construction. But I do take the Theocracy here, and I have already the Warfare in hand, so you might argue that maybe I should just go for the Warfare if I want to get my 3rd military action going, but I don't have enough science to go for it at the next turn. There is a chance that maybe I could get help from the last development, but I do think the Theocracy has some different purposes. First of all, it guarantees me that I will be able to build another knight at my next turn, because if the age will end, those 3 workers will all be unhappy, and I could still build a 3rd knight, but only with disbanding a warrior, missing out on an additional draw, missing also out on 1 strength, which could make a difference on how easily my opponents can defend against an aggression. If I instead go for Theocracy Revolution at the next turn, not only can I keep this warrior and still build an additional knight, I also get of course the additional strength from the Theocracy and an additional military action, making myself potentially a lot more threatening. So I will then be at 15 strength if I go for the Theocracy and an additional knight, and it's definitely an amount of strength that the opponents maybe can't that easily handle. Probably they can. Cogito can go for an additional swordsman, can maybe go for Saladin and take 2 additional strength from him. Fjantarik has Nostradamus, can go for swordsman. So probably they will be able to somehow defend against this. But I thought that there is at least a potential for me going for a really big strength push, depending on maybe how the Colossus draws will end up being. Because after going for the Theocracy Revolution, I have 1 free population to put into knights, meaning I'm on 3 knights at the moment. But I still have 2 unhappy workers, but I thought maybe it could be nice to actually go for the Bread and Circuses. There are still 2 copies, there's sadly no Pierre, but just to get them to fix my happy faces very cheaply. Also getting one additional strength could be nice. Then I have another free population lying around, which I could put into the knights at some point, meaning I would be at 4 knights. And then if I either get a foray relatively quickly or maybe manage to pull a plunder off, I could maybe have some chances to get some additional food using Barbarossa for an additional activation, or the uncertain borders could be revealed, which in the additional yellow token would also free up one more worker potentially. So with that, I might get even a 5th knight, and then I can maybe at some point disband this warrior, go for 6th knight. Of course, that will all take some time, but I thought it's not completely unrealistic for me to set something up like this. And if I do draw a war, something from the Colossus or some aggressions, then with going up for 2 upgraded medieval heavy cavalry tactics would put me at something like 25 or 26 strength, which would be very threatening, and I thought it could be worth doing, even though it means I'm stuck on Theocracy, but there is some potential in the air. It makes sure that I can build a 3rd knight cleanly without having to disband a warrior. I have the 3rd military action, and there are just not the greatest alternatives here, so I went for the Theocracy, as I thought there is some potential for maybe a big military push. Now I have 1 civil action left. I could take the drama, but I was really afraid of hand space issues. I might commit to the Theocracy, meaning I might stay in 4 civil actions for a little while. It could be that a drama is just a pick that I do because maybe it could do something for me, but I rather planned on going for the bread and circuses. Then I just thought it's very unlikely that I will go for the dramas, and I didn't want to create myself problems because of hand space, so I was actually willing to just skip the last civil action here. It's a little bit of a commitment, but I of course didn't develop the Theocracy yet. It might just be nice to have it as an option also, but I was at this point thinking that maybe I could really have some potential to set up some big military. Cogito goes for Saladin. I let him stay on 2 civil actions for him, meaning he has to spend 3/4 of his turn just to get Saladin going, but he has now the Homer bonus, can keep the happy face, will upgrade a warrior to swordsman. He might have a little bit of an issue because he will be at 3 food at the next turn. He will lose those 2 yellow tokens, meaning that worker will be unhappy, meaning he's just missing 1 food depending on the last development to build a 4th swordsman, which could make him a bit safer. Fjantarik Seeds, the development of planning is revealed, and all of those developments don't help him to get some additional population. Our development of science, politics, and religion are revealed. Fjantarik takes the free religion, he goes for the knights, builds a knight, goes for the phalanx tactic, is now at 7+3 strength, and then takes reserves and patriotism, and now we are in a situation where I'm the weakest, and the event deck has flipped. I have an event that I actually still have an event, don't have an event. Actually, I will have an event in hand now when I get the Colossus draws. So I could of course push, but there are some strength events coming, so I definitely don't want to push here. And then it was an interesting decision here on what to take from development of planning. I could just take the free religion, but in this situation I really didn't like it, because I planned to go for Theocracy. The age did actually end, meaning the Theocracy is quite nice to have. Now there's also bread and circus in the row, but if I take, develop and build one, I'm missing 1 resource to also build a knight, so that doesn't work very cleanly, and so I thought going for the Theocracy could be quite interesting. But then I still have 2 unhappy workers, meaning I was really still eyeing the 2nd copy of Bread and Circuses. I was thinking that I said I might have some strength potential, but to fully unlock the strength potential I might need the Bread and Circuses and to free up 1 more worker. And if I then have a worker sitting in religion, if I go for Bread and Circus, might have to disband it if I want to pull this off. So I didn't like the development of religion here, and rather preferred it to maybe go into Bread and Circuses. And then there are 2 alternative developments that I can choose from: the development of science and also the development of politics. In this situation, I think the development of politics could potentially be very, very interesting. It could give me a war, it could give me an aggression. I was not that confident in my abilities to actually pull off an aggression, but a war could very much work very nicely. But I just don't know what cards I will get. Maybe those cards could be worth it, but I am missing out on 2 science for it. Science could still also turn out to be very, very valuable, allowing me to go for the technologies that I need to go for. And also, I have already some decent cards drawn. I have 1 aggression in hand. It's only from H1, but it's at least an aggression. I have 2 potential interesting strength events that I can push, especially the politics of strength might be nice at some point. So I thought I just went rather with the science, as that gives me some safe value, but I do think it was a very interesting case here to maybe use the development of politics and get even more draws to further maybe get some politics cards that can be used if I go for a lot of strength. With the development of science taken, however, there is the option of going for the Theocracy peacefully. Could maybe then take the cultural heritage, but I just thought the things that I can do after developing it peacefully are not that great, and I rather want to save some science with going for the revolution. So I will revolt, I will build this knight, and now I'm sitting at 15 strength, nicely prepared to win those strength events, so I hopefully will at least be getting some guaranteed value out of those events, and who knows, maybe at some point I will draw a war or an aggression, maybe I have the chance to indeed go for bread and circus the next turn, get the foray relatively quickly, and really build up a lot of strength. I made a decision to keep the colonization card, the politics of strength and aggression. I draw another aggression and a grain wave, so two definitely nicely usable cards, but sadly no war. Cogito offered the trade routes agreement to Fjantarik. He wants to just at least have the chance of this pact being accepted, because if it is accepted, then he could use a resource to actually increase his population one more time, but of course Fjantarik sees how valuable that would be for him, would release a lot of pressure for him, maybe militarily, and with that he rejects the pact. Cogito this turn will go for the monarchy peacefully with the discount from the Acropolis, has taken the development of religion to even save one more science. Can go for the cartography? Could be an indicator for some colonies, but could also be an indicator that Cogito maybe just really needs the additional strength in order to be able to defend against an aggression. He then takes the alchemy, the cultural heritage, and uses Saladin for strength. So I kinda took this cartography more as an indicator that maybe at the moment Cogito has only one age, one colonization card in hand, and maybe just needs the strength to defend against an aggression, because if he needs two cards, who knows, maybe I would try it, have drawn some additional cards from the Colossus, or maybe you just wanted to play it safe, but of course it could also be that there is also a colony coming. Now it's Fjantarik's turn, he's the weakest, and he doesn't see it. Either he just doesn't have a nice event, or he wanted to play it a bit more carefully, with me having had Sansun going for a strength push and maybe wants to increase his strength first. He plays the reserves for food, allowing him to just have enough food to increase his population. I was a bit sad to see that this copy of Bread and Circus will be discarded, while the other one will stay on 2 civil actions, making it a bit more costly for me to go for them. However, at the end I went for a turn where I don't go for them anyway, and I also wouldn't have gone for them if they would have stayed on 1 civil action. So at the end it doesn't really matter for my turn. With both of my opponents having prepared nicely to defend against an aggression, I rather went for seeding an event. I could already commit to the politics of strength, however it will take a while until those H2 events will be revealed, so I decided to go with the bit safer event first, with the Grime Wave. The event revealed is the Call to Arms, so already one strength event out, which is nice, and I think it's quite a bit painful for both of my opponents. Cogito are now only being able to operate on 3 civil actions on his next turn, and Fjantarik operating on 4, but both of them also got some additional H2 draws, so that might also be nice for them. And here I made the decision to go for Nobel. And I do think it's maybe necessary. It's a bit bad, because I was hoping that with the foray, maybe I could go for another Barbarossa activation, and one Barbarossa activation is just a lot of value. But I also think that additional science production is extremely strong for myself, but also for my opponents. I thought Cogito, who at the moment uses Saladin for strength anyway, could just get a strength from Nobel and get more science production. Of course he will finish Universitas soon, but still Nobel could be an extremely helpful leader for him. And also Fjantarik could really use the science boost. An early Nobel I think is just very strong, and so I didn't want to wait for at some point maybe the foray being revealed and getting an additional Barbarossa activation. I at the end just wanted to go for Nobel here. At least Nobel also gives me 2 additional strength immediately, so I'm at 17. That definitely could also again make it a bit more difficult for my opponents to react to that. I pass in the Bread and Circuses, meaning my dream of going for a double heavy cavalry for a second one is now maybe a bit more difficult to pull off, but I just thought Nobel is very valuable here, and I went for him. And then to get out of corruption, I upgraded my second lab. Now I'm sitting at 6 science production, meaning that hopefully at some point I will be able to nicely transition out of the Theocracy, to not be stuck on it for too long, and I also should easily be able to support something like coal and maybe justice system at some point. I keep the aggression and the politics of strength in hand. I draw some colonies. There is a navigation coming down the road. I also draw another aggression. Cogito will again try to maybe get out of this missing one food to increase his population misery, and this time he will be successful, but also he this time can maybe offer Fjantarik more benefit for himself. He this time the international trade agreement is offered, sadly not to me, but Fjantarik will now get an additional resource production, while Cogito will get an additional food production, which will allow him to increase his population at the next turn, and then he has the ability to put another worker into swordsman. This turn he will finish the Universitas, going up to 4 science production. He maybe could have somehow taken the coal, but now the call to arms maybe does some nice work, because with only having 3 civil actions, I do think that would have been incredibly costly, probably meaning taking corruption and not finishing the Universitas. I do think that's way too costly to take it, but that means with both of us still being on bronze mines, I will have the chance to get a first copy of coal going. Cogito blazed in the cultural heritage with his last civil action. Fjantarik seeds and opens the uncertain borders. I am the strongest, so I get an additional yellow token. Cogito is the weakest. And it's a bit unfortunate for him, because he really put some effort into getting this additional food going, but now the next worker is out of the sudden an unhappy one, making it that maybe it's not that important after all, having gotten the additional food, but it might still be nice for him to have this population, even though maybe short term it is now not that useful. Fjantarik goes for the railroad, a very nice decision, a very nice wonder for him, I think, because he will get a lot safer with the strength, while at the same time also improving his economy. I think the railroad can do a very nice job with allowing that, and then he will also take the urban growth. I was happy to see it, because that lets the coal fall down to 1 civil action for me. Now it is my turn, and I continued with pushing and seeded the politics of strength into the deck. The new deposits are revealed. Maybe I could have tried an aggression against Cogito, but especially with the call to arms, he now at this point had already quite some H2 draws, so I rather just wanted to get the strength event going, especially because I was kind of hoping for the foray. With the additional resource from the foray, I could go for a coal upgrade already this turn. I was in 5 resources at my politics phase. There's no foray revealed, but there's also something revealed that gives me additional resources. Maybe the foray would have been better, because then the new deposits would have been revealed after I already went for 1 coal upgrade, but I also wasn't too unhappy about it, because at least it is an event that allows me now to go for this coal upgrade, which allows me to have a nice way to spend my civil actions and get my production going. Sadly, the second copy of coal is already coming down the road, so Cogito doesn't have to wait that long for going into that. And it is also coming down the road together with James Watt even. I go for this 1 coal upgrade. I have then 1 civil action left, and it was basically a decision for me here between both of those blue technologies. I could of course also develop the warfare, but I have already 3 military actions. I can't really pull an aggression off that easily also if I have 1 additional strength, so I didn't want to commit science into the warfare. Maybe I could also still have a shot at getting the strategy, which could make myself again quite threatening. The architecture is of course a technology that could generate quite some value over the time, maybe saving some resources when I go for more urban buildings, saving some civil actions. There are some interesting wonders now that I went for an early coal upgrade. Wonders like Harvard College and Ocean Liner Service could be quite interesting, even though the Harvard College with having that much science production is maybe not that valuable, so mainly the Ocean Liner Service could be nice for me. But I also have those 2 colonies in hand. If I can't go for aggressions, maybe it could be nice to even at least have the ability to push. And I have, I think, enough science to support the navigation. The 2 strength at least also make me maybe a bit more threatening, but I can also maybe, together with the Colossus, manage to win some of those colonies relatively cheaply. There's no Suez Canal, but if I win them very cheaply, I do think it can still be extremely powerful getting those colonies. And I also made the decision then to keep both of them in hand. I draw even another one, also the fortifications tactic, which is nice to have, but it is also maybe a bit difficult to transition. The upgraded heavy cavalry tactic is actually also giving me 5 additional strength, so I would need 4 cannons until that will give me more strength, so let's see if I will be able to make that work. Cogito seeds, now the foray is revealed, while Cogito got hit by those other 2 strength events, now at least he is part of the foray. And he actually makes the decision to take 3 food out of it, so now again with the additional food generation from the pact, he will be able to finally at the next turn get a population out that will be happy, maybe allowing him to build a bit more military to be a bit safer. He then this turn to get out of corruption goes for 2 alchemy upgrades. He is not willing to take the coal for 3 civil actions, and he might have a chance to get both James Watt and coal for 1 civil action at the next turn. I was kinda hoping that maybe Fjantarik will take either architecture or journalism to make James Watt discarded, as I think James Watt has some very big potential for Cogito here if he also gets the selective breeding. Fjantarik at his turn cedes. The one last unknown event in the event deck is the historic territory. I was not willing to send a knight here, I was just willing to send a warrior and a colonization card. I didn't want to lose too much pressure here. And the next event that is coming are the raiders, and I just thought it could be nice to be able to continue pushing, and at some point there might be some stronger colonies coming, so I was just willing to bid this warrior, and that is at the end not enough to win it. Fjantarik wins it, but at least he has to send a whole rifleman. Paying those 5 resources in a population to get the historic territory 1 can be fine. He has a lot of resource production at least, especially when he has finished the railroad, so probably it's fine for him, but it is at least a price that he has to pay here, so I was not too unhappy to see it. He at this turn will finish the railroad, getting quite a bit of additional strength going, takes the scientific method in hand, plays the patriotism, goes for a rifleman, goes for knight, and he actually has the conquistadors tactic. With that he's actually the strongest now, being prepared for those strength events that are coming, so I might have to lose the raiders potentially. Also, he doesn't take any card from the row, sadly making it that James Watt will be available for Cogito, and also letting the Republic stay on 3 civil actions for me. And if it wouldn't have stayed on 3 civil actions, I think I would have this turn highly considered to go for it. First of all, I will seed. I start with seeding the historic territory 2. At the moment I can use the happy faces quite nicely, so I thought maybe that's the colony that I want to commit to first. And the event revealed are the raiders, but there's not really a way how I can overtake Fjantarik in strength very easily, so I made a decision to go for the raiders here. And then I will actually make the full food into resource transition. I first gain 3 resources from the fray, and then I lose my last food and 1 resource from the raiders, so it's quite funny that those events are evaluated immediately after each other. But now I have just enough resource thanks to the fray, and still after having lost 1 hour to the raiders, to go for 1 coal upgrade this turn, and then I have just enough to finish the ocean liner service at the next turn, which could be quite strong. If the Republic would have been on 2 civil actions, I do think I might have considered to just take the Republic, develop it. After that I have the same amount of civil actions as before, and I could have just gone for the same turn, but with having a Republic already implemented, with it staying on 3 civil actions, that's however not possible. It would of course be a commitment. I would release a lot of my military pressure, I would have 2 unhappy workers again out of the sudden, but getting this boost going up to 7 civil actions might just be worth it, so I thought about doing it. However, maybe it's also not too bad to delay it by 1 more turn. Maybe I can still pull off a bit of a strength push, and then it could still be nice to maybe have the Theocracy, the strength, the 3rd military action, and the happy phase. But I definitely wanted to get the ocean liner here. I don't know when the selective breedings will be available, and it is just a very nice way to fix my population income here, which is the last part of my economy, apart from maybe having additional civil actions that I still need. So I go for that. I will keep the territory and the tactic in hand, and I draw an interesting card here, the mobile artillery tactic. If I should manage to get 1 of the 2 copies of cannons, then that could turn out to be a very, very strong tactic for me. I just need to build 2 cannons and have already a tactic that gives me 10 additional strength. And actually both copies of cannons are on the row at the moment, so I was really hoping that maybe one of my opponents doesn't take one and I have a chance to get one at the next turn. But first of all, Cogito seeds, and the event revealed is actually the autonomous territory, which is a very strong colony. I was not willing to bid too much, as I didn't want to lose all of my strength. And at the end I'm not able to win it, but I was at least happy to see that both of my opponents really went into a big bid race, and at the end it's at least a very costly price for Cogito. He has to send a lot of colonization cards away. At my turn I think Cogito actually needed 2 defense cards from H2 to defend himself. After having taken the civil action from Saladin, I considered trying out an aggression against him, as I know from his videos, as maybe you also know from mine, that he sometimes is willing to take some risks with not being able to defend against an aggression. So I thought maybe I should try it, but it would be quite risky and would cost me some draws, and so at the end I didn't go for it, and as we can see, this time he actually had the defense cards that he would have needed to defend himself. And then he takes 5 resources out of the autonomous territory, rebuilds his units immediately, might now be a bit in danger of an aggression. but can fix that nicely with going for the strategy, so now he should be completely safe. Takes James Watt in hand, takes the coal in hand, and takes the reserves in hand. With those rich lands, James Watt, he might be able to go into coal very quickly and then build up a very strong economy. But for the moment he's a bit behind in strength, even after having gone for the strategy. Doesn't have more population income, so he could still be a bit vulnerable. But if he can build up his economy with James Watt, he might go into a very strong position for H3. Now that he has sent that many colonization cards away, he makes the decision to do not take any risk here and actually takes the strength from Saladin, as otherwise Fjantarik or I could have maybe tried out an aggression. Now it's Fjantarik's turn and he will seed with Nostradamus. At least my 2 strength events stay in the deck, maybe. As you can see, Cogito didn't go for one of the cannons, and if Fjantarik isn't willing to deny this copy of cannon for me, then maybe I can actually go for a bit more strength at my next turn and still try to win the politics of strength in the crime wave. So the prosperity is revealed, a little bit of food is gained by everyone. Fjantarik is willing to go for Catherine here. The other leaders that he maybe could have waited for are Gaudi and Napoleon, so maybe he just wants to go for the leader that is available now, that he can go for third. Maybe he had the hope that he can actually steal 2 yellow tokens, because there's definitely the chance that maybe I just want to finish the ocean liner service during my turn to get my population going, but if I do that now, then I will get a yellow token stolen potentially from Catherine. And then after electing Catherine, he will go for the scientific method. Could go for 2 upgrades, but he wants to also get the cannons, has maybe a tactic for it. Goes for an upgrade from warrior to rifleman, is now sitting at 20 strength. And with Cogito just having sent a lot of colonization cards away, maybe it will also force him again to be a bit careful with his strength. Now it is my turn, and this turn I made a decision to not push, because I will actually get stronger during my turn. I definitely wanted to take the cannons here. I have this tactic and that gives me a lot of strength potentially, and I could of course just finish the ocean liner service, but I thought the cannons are too important here, and potentially there's actually an option to still finish the ocean liner service, because if I take the Republic and develop it afterwards, I have still 4 civil actions left and could just finish the ocean liner service, and that was definitely a turn that I heavily considered. But at the last turn, I think I would have liked it a lot to go for the Republic. Now, on the other hand, I thought that I maybe shouldn't go for it, because I have now out of the set the tactic, I have the cannons available, I have a way to actually increase my strength, and then with the ability to maybe set up a second mobile artillery tactic relatively quickly, I have quite some strength potential. And while I might not have any aggressions or wars in hand right now, there is a politics of strength that hopefully will soon be revealed, and also with the start of H3 I will get the additional Colossus draws, so while at the turn before I thought, maybe my strength push is over and I try to transition into a more economy focused play again, and I was unhappy that I didn't get a chance to get into the Republic immediately. This turn, with having drawn this tactic and with the politics of strength not being revealed yet, I thought it has a lot of potential to now try to again go for a bit more of a military push. I take the cannons, I develop the cannons, I build one. I think I keep the tactic in hand for now, as it doesn't improve my strength, as the heavy cavalry tactic is also giving me 5 strength, and I wanted to get an additional draw earlier, as maybe getting an aggression or war could be quite strong. I will then also develop the navigation. That's just a very cheap way for me to get some additional strength, so that I actually win the politics of strength if it is revealed. Also getting stronger, instead of maybe just finishing the ocean liner service, had the advantage that I don't get a yellow token stolen from Fjantarik, which is nice. And then after having done all of those actions, it's basically a question for me, or instead of the navigation, I could have also developed a warfare, but I have already committed to 1 colony at the moment. I now stay on Theocracy, so I have 3 military actions at least, so I rather wanted to commit to the navigation here. And then for the last civil action, I could just build a step, but I also could take the breakthrough for 1 civil action. I could also take the opera, but I don't think I need it really here. There's of course Chaplain in H3, but now I think I should completely focus maybe on just getting the ocean liner done and maybe building up some strength. But a breakthrough for 1 civil action is of course very valuable. The problem is I am on 4 civil actions. The ocean liner service will take 4 civil actions, so it's a very civil action intensive wonder, and with that I even though normally a breakthrough for 1 civil action is a great card to get, I rather valued it higher to use my civil actions efficiently. And also at the next turn, that, with having built the step already, could allow me to take and develop the justice system, afterwards still having enough civil actions to finish the ocean liner service. And I do think it could be important to at least not be stuck on 4 civil actions and instead go up to 5 civil actions with the justice system. If I take the breakthrough and don't build a step on the ocean liner, then I would have to decide whether I go for the justice system or the ocean liner service at the next turn. So also with having that in mind, I thought it should be better here to go for the first step of the ocean liner. Now it's the end of my turn. I will get 2 draws, and I was very, very happy about one of the draws. I actually draw a war over territory, definitely a bit lucky, but I also had a bunch of draws before where I didn't draw a war, so now I do get a war, and I have maybe even the potential to pull off a relatively big war already at the next turn, even though that might mean delaying the ocean liner, but of course that could be totally worth it if I get maybe a second mobile artillery army going and then have a lot of strength to work with. Cogito at his turn plays the resources, goes for James Watt, develops the coal, goes 1 upgrade, goes for a second upgrade, actually not using the rich land because otherwise he would have corruption, and then he has 2 civil actions left, takes the selective breeding, and actually the organized religion doesn't go for the breakthrough, but I mean there are still the team sports in the organized religion left, but I need a happy face solution. Fjantarik still needs one, so maybe he just doesn't want to take any risks, and at least he has some decent science production. And no. He gets now some nice value out of James Watt, but he is also sitting at 12 strength, could be vulnerable to an aggression, and could also, of course, be very vulnerable to a war. Has only 7 resources saved up, can only threaten to build 1 cavalryman, not 2. I have knowledge about the top 2 events, so if I should go for a war at my turn, I know that there are no additional resources revealed by the event deck. And so with that, he's now quite vulnerable, but I think at this turn there was also not really anything that he could have done to make himself less vulnerable, because those coal upgrades were incredibly cheap. He gets more resource out of it immediately, so if he wouldn't have invested anything into the coal upgrades, then he would have had some issues to get out of corruption, and would have had, even if he would have somehow managed to get out of corruption, maybe with spending on farm or something and building a swordsman, then he would have only had 9 resources instead of 7, so that also wouldn't have helped him that much. So I do think it makes completely sense to go for those coal upgrades this turn. And then at Fjantarik's turn we can see that I'm not the only one who wants to maybe get some value out of Cogito being a bit vulnerable at the moment. Fjantarik declares a war over technology, develops the cannons, destroys the mines, still has decent resource production left thanks to the railroad, and then with the Napoleonic army tactic he goes up to 25 strength, upgrades 1 lab, takes the rich land and takes the justice system. Now it is my turn, and I also want to go for that war. There is a chance that maybe with 2 very big H2 wars being declared, maybe Cogito could already resign, but at this point there's still the whole of H3 to play, so I think it would be a bit too early, and either way, either I make him resign and then just Iron Fjantarik get both 7 cultures, so at least Fjantarik doesn't get a lot of science out of it, or we at least both get a very strong H2 war going, but I expected that Cogito will definitely still play on, because there's still a lot to play and he might still have quite some potential with James Watt. But I will go for the war over territory here. I will destroy mine. I thought about destroying a farm. I will get some yellow tokens, and maybe I mean I'm on 0 food immediately, and I thought that maybe Cogito will actually defend in a way where he we can maybe take a look at this. Yeah, I will go for the warfare, I will go for a cannon, I revealed a mobile artillery tactic. I'm now at 31 strength, and I thought maybe Cogito will go up to 17 strength potentially, and then I will only get, I think, 3 yellow tokens, which is still nice, but then I think, especially if the age should end and I lose 2, I gain 1 from the ocean liner service, but it will also mean that I increase my population immediately. There's a chance that I would have to rebuild the farm immediately, is basically what I want to say, and then I thought it's just better to lose the mine here. At least I'm still at 6 resource production, and I can now go up to 31 strength, making it that I'm the strongest again, so that I still have a chance to win the politics of strength. I will get a Colossus draw soon, so I was thinking that I have quite some potential with my military here. Now I have 2 civil actions left, and I made the decision to first of all take the team sports. I need still a happy face solution. Now I have the chance to get 1 for 1 civil action, and getting even more strength by the team sports could be nice. And then for the last civil action, I either can maybe just build another step in the ocean liner, or I can maybe go for the urban growth. At a turn before, I was not willing to go for the breakthrough because I wanted to be more civil action effective, so maybe it would be consequent to now go for the step. But if I want to go for another cannon, the team sports, and finishing the ocean liner service soon, I just thought I need a lot of resources, and the urban growth could just help me being able to build more stuff in the near future. So here I was actually willing to take the urban growth, and then maybe at the next turn I can finally finish the ocean liner service. And yeah, that war might definitely be problematic, especially it requires Cogito quite some investment to defend, but if he doesn't defend a lot, then Fjantarik might even steal the strategy from him, which could leave him completely vulnerable. On the other hand, it's the question if Fjantarik even wants to steal the strategy, because then Cogito loses 3 strength for the war against me, so Fjantarik might actually help me a little bit, especially with my Colossus draws. Maybe it's more likely that I actually have more cards to punish Cogito if he is very weak, maybe with aggressions and stuff, and so maybe there's a chance that Fjantarik, even if he has the chance to do so, wouldn't even be able to steal the strategy. It's actually quite difficult for Kogi to avoid getting the strategy stolen, or if he doesn't want to give Fjantarik the option, because for example he could go for 2 swordsmen, but that would only put him at 17 strength, which is still just enough for Fjantarik to steal the strategy. The only thing that he could do is actually to build a cavalryman, switch to the phalanx tactic, and then build a warrior, meaning he needs to destroy 2 things. Building a warrior with then having switched to phalanx tactic feels annoying, so it would be very costly, but if he wants to make sure to not lose the strategy, then that would be, I think, the only way that he can do so. Cogito first of all seeds. I was hoping maybe to see the politics of strength. On one hand, the other hand, it could also be nice to maybe get it with H3 cards instead of H2 cards. It isn't revealed instead of Crime Wave, which will hit both of my opponents. Cogito will indeed go for the cavalryman, will increase his population, builds the cavalryman, copies the phalanx tactic, and then develops the selective breeding before maybe all of his science gets stolen. He will be at 17 strength, he won't go for more, meaning the strategy could potentially be stolen by Fjantarik, but that would mean that I gain an additional yellow token out of the war, so maybe I would be somewhat fine with it. And then Cogito will go for 2 food upgrades, wants to build up some economy instead of maybe sacrificing one more thing, or actually he still has to sacrifice one more thing, but he would have to sacrifice another thing if he wants to go for an additional unit. So I do think it makes sense, and at least he has some hope that the strategy doesn't get stolen, but it's the question what he even wants to hope for here, because while losing the strategy would be a complete disaster for him, makes him completely vulnerable. If he gets just all of his science stolen, then after losing the yellow tokens, he has some really, and also the yellow tokens to the end of the age, he has some really big uprising issues, and then he doesn't have enough science to go for the organized religion. So either way, he is in an extremely vulnerable spot, so those 2 wars I think hit him really hard here, and really are a very big setback for him. Now it's Fjantarik's turn. He will steal the 6 science, so he makes the decision to not steal the strategy. Cogito is now stuck on 0 science. Fjantarik seeds, meaning now the politics of strength is revealed. My first reaction was, maybe it could have been better to see it in H3, but it only lasted as long as I saw the cards that I actually drew with that. And as you can see, I draw 2 more H2 wars. I draw the Annex, which in this case is an extremely strong aggression, as it might allow me to maybe steal the autonomous territory from Cogito. And I also draw the Cold War, a potentially nice event to have. So I thought, now I really have a lot of potential. I can soon go for 3rd cannon and really cause some issues for my opponents. Now it's Fjantarik's turn. He goes for the justice system, takes the organized religion, the breakthrough, the efficient upgrade, so just does some stuff. The second, as a copy of selective breeding, has been very late, so he still hasn't upgraded his farms, and that could be a bit of an issue for him, having to operate on relatively low population. Now the age ends. I will get my Colossus draws now, and now, of course, I was very excited to see what I will get, and I was also happy to see what I will get. Another war, another aggression, a colonization card as the historic territory coming. So really some good stuff. Lada has now given me some very nice draws that I can operate on. And then, I first of all will now gain some additional yellow tokens, and then the big question was of course what to do with my politics action this turn. And let's maybe just first of all see how my board will look like after I steal those 3 yellow tokens. I fix my uprising issues that I had for a moment with that, and as you can see, I will make the decision to actually go for a war, but not against Cogito, instead against Fjantarik. When we take a look at Cogito's board, I do think he has some big issues at his turn. He has very big uprising issues, but because of having all his science lost to the war, he can't go for the organized religion during his turn, meaning the only way for him to not have an uprising is to maybe disband a bunch of units. He could of course also disband farms, mines, or alchemies, but that would be extremely costly. So I think at this point he has to take risks and maybe just disband a bunch of units. But then of course he's extremely vulnerable. He got hit really hard. Of course I could also go for a war against him, but I thought if I now just follow up with another war immediately, he might just resign, and I didn't like that too much, and I rather at this point thought it could be nice to maybe hit Fjantarik a little bit. However, Fjantarik can defend himself actually quite nicely. He can go for another cannon. It requires him to destroy something though, which is at least something nice, and then he can maybe either go for another unit, or what I thought he might be doing, instead of going for the organized religion, he could go for the bro sports. There are some different ways how he can get even more strength, so probably it will only be a relatively small war. But the main thing that I wanted to achieve with that was not only to maybe get a little bit of value out of it, probably I will steal just 1 yellow token from him, but also to force him to react, because that will very likely mean that he again has to delay his farm upgrades, meaning that he indeed might be stuck on very low population. Maybe he will lose another yellow token from this war, which then together with delaying his farm upgrades even more could just put him in a position where he is very low on population, which could make it a lot easier for me to maybe punish him further going into H3, with maybe going for even more wars that I have in hand, and maybe with me having the ocean liner service soon. I will delay it again. That got delayed quite a bit with me going for this military push, but still I thought I might have a lot more population to work with, and so I at the end went for this war against Fjantarik. I could have also gone with a war over technology, even a war over culture, but I thought now that my goal is to maybe make him be stuck on low population, also wanted to further enhance those problems with maybe stealing yellow token from him. And then I this turn will destroy a farm. I could also destroy this warrior. Maybe I should have actually done it, keeping the farm for now, as I might have to rebuild it relatively soon. So maybe that could be nice. There are 2 reasons why I wanted to keep the warrior. One is that I still have 1 additional strength thanks to it, and also have an additional draw, both of which could be nice to have. The strength I thought might not make a difference, but there is a chance. There are some different options for Fjantarik, how he could increase his strength, and there could be a situation where it actually could make a difference, and could maybe make it a bit easier for him to not lose 2 yellow tokens, or if he gets maybe help from some events or something, maybe even win the war. And the other reason is that there is a colony coming that I have no knowledge of. There might be even more colonies coming. I have this big colonization bonus, so it could be bad if a colony is revealed during the war and I don't have the ability to bid for it. However, at the end of my turn I will actually make the decision to discard all of my colonization cards, as it is quite tricky to keep all of the cards in hand that I want to. I really thought about keeping the H3 defense card to maybe have a chance to win the historic territory, but I will actually go for team sports this turn to make me even stronger for the war, and then I don't really need the happy faces, and just for the culture maybe it's not that great or that important to win it anyway. I would still take it for the warrior, of course, but I will actually discard it, so keeping this warrior for the colony is actually not that big of a reason, because without having any colonization cards in hand, the chance that I will win a colony at the end is actually relatively low. So I will destroy a farm here, and I might not need to rebuild it immediately the next turn, at least I was hoping, but it could still maybe be an idea to just disband a warrior here, as I have enough military actions to do so, but getting additional draws in my position is also just extremely valuable. I then also will build a team force, just getting even more strength. First of all, to make it more difficult for Fjantarik to defend nicely, and second of all, at the next turn I really wanted to get this annex going, because being stuck on 4 civil actions for longer could be a real burden, and getting the annex from Cogito could be quite big, and I just wanted to also increase my chances with going for as much strength as possible to get a successful aggression going. Now I have 1 civil action left. And I do think, again, I could just be civil action efficient and build a step of the ocean liner service, but I do think getting the engineering genius here for 1 civil action, getting 4 resources for just 1 civil action is too valuable, and at the next turn I will be able to finish the ocean liner service, and if I should indeed be able to steal the autonomous territory, I would at least have 2 civil actions left after doing that, meaning that maybe if there's a card that I want to, I can take it at least if it is on 2 civil actions without delaying the ocean liner service further. And as you can see, I just keep all the aggressive cards in hand. I really thought about maybe discarding the Armed Intervention to keep the colonization card, but I don't know whether that will actually allow me to win a colony and how much of a difference it will make, while having the Armed Intervention could just mean that I have the ability to use one of my politics actions to get maybe a 7 culture from Cogito, which could just be a very nice option to have. I wanted to keep both wars, I definitely wanted to keep the annex, so it was a bit of a decision for me between keeping the colonization card or the armed intervention. At the end I went with the armed intervention, and I really have the necessary tools here to maybe go for a very aggressive H3 potentially. Now it's Cogito's turn, he will seed, and an event is revealed that might really help him to get a little bit back into the game, because he had those very big uprising issues, might have just to disband 2 units to just fix not having an uprising, but now with the historic territory being revealed, and with both of his opponents not being willing to bid as much because of a war going on between them, he is able to win this relatively cheaply, wins it for only 5, could have just sent a cavalryman with the cartography, but is actually willing to send a colonization card away, which I was somewhat happy to see, because it makes it at least more likely that I can actually pull an aggression off. And now out of the sudden he doesn't need to disband any more unit, so winning this colony I think helps him a lot here. I was not happy to see it, because out of the sudden, also with the increased culture, we can take a look at the end of his turn. He builds a cavalryman, he has the Assar's tactic that he reveals, takes the patriotism, frugality, revolutionary idea, reserves, has a lot of yellow cards, will at the end of his turn be at 41 culture, has a culture lead. So I was fearing at least a little bit that maybe that could bring him back into the game, but I still think he lost a lot of things. His yellow bank is still very much damaged, and it will take quite a while until he can maybe get enough strength to defend himself just with operating on those hussars. So I was hoping that it's not... Before this historic territory was revealed, I thought Cogito's position might be dead. But now that it got fixed by this, I was just thinking maybe there's again a way back into the game for him. Which might also be nice, because maybe that could also allow that at some point I can declare war against him without him resigning immediately. I can maybe go for more aggression, so him maybe having an ability to stay in the game could also be beneficial for myself. We are now at the beginning of H3, so we can maybe take a look at the overview, and we can see that I'm a bit behind in culture, which is bad. Also at the moment I'm still stuck on 4 civil actions, which might change though if I'm able to steal the autonomous territory. I also haven't fixed my population income that nicely, but I've stolen a lot of yellow tokens, and maybe at the next turn I will finally be able to finish the ocean liner service, which will still give me a nice way to get more population, while Cogito has lost a lot of yellow tokens, which gives him really some issues with his population, while Fjantarik didn't have a chance to upgrade his farms yet, so I was hoping that that might be an important benefit for my civilization, especially if the game continues to be military heavy. Then I have some very decent science production. Maybe I can go for an H3 government form at some point, but also Fjantarik and Cogito have some decent science production. Fjantarik has the best resource production, has more civil actions, so my economy at this point is still very much limited on my low civil action count. Now it's Fjantarik's turn. I was of course very interested to see on how he wants to defend. And he goes for a line of defense that I didn't consider that much, but I do think it makes sense. He doesn't go for the bro sports as a way to fix his happy faces, instead upgrades the religion to organized religion, takes the selective breeding in hand. I do think him defending with going for bro sports and cannons, I do think maybe he would have required all of his civil actions, I'm not completely certain, and might have meant that he has to miss out on the selective breeding, and now he goes for another Napoleonic army tactic. Doing that alone would mean that he would lose 2 yellow tokens, but with also going for those 2 upgrades to cavalryman, he will now only lose 1. And I do think that also has another advantage, because now with him having this unit set up, I just always in H3 have to consider the possibility of him having the modern army tactic. And that could give him a huge strength potential and could make it really difficult for me to declare war. Even when he doesn't really have a lot of population to work with, there's always the danger in the air that maybe he can go for two more modern army tactics and I could just lose a war that I declare against him. So also in that regard, I think it's quite clever to go for the cavalryman here. Now it is my turn. I will steal a yellow token from Fjantarik, so that's at least something. Fjantarik was able to mitigate it a little bit, the yellow token loss, with stealing yellow token with Catherine from Cogito, which again actually puts Cogito in a bit of an annoying situation, because after I actually go for the successful annex, stealing the autonomous territory from him, but also with losing the yellow token, he has some issues again out of the sudden with his population. And yeah, I just, for my turn, thought it's too important to get this additional civil and military action going. I could, of course, immediately go for another war, but at this point there might again be the danger that Cogito will just resign. Fjantarik is nicely prepared to at least threaten a nice amount of defense, even though he maybe doesn't want to commit to a lot of destroying a lot of stuff. So maybe I could have considered just going for more, but also I thought it's very important this turn to get the ocean liner service going. I didn't want to delay this even longer. I considered taking and developing the engineering and then finishing the ocean liner service, which would take all of my civil actions, but the engineering could be a nice technology to have. But with having all of those aggressive cards in hand, I wanted to play it towards the direction a bit more, instead of maybe going for a bit more of a line that has some advantages in a peaceful game. Maybe I should do it, because against Fjantarik, I do think it could be a bit tricky to pull off some military stuff with him being able to easily threaten a big amount of strength, just in case he has drawn a modern army tactic. And so maybe it could be an idea to go for a bit of more of a peaceful line. Here I have already the warfare, and the thing that I will be doing is to go for the military theory. Maybe I could have also just taken the engineering in hand instead of committing 9 science to it already, which could make it a bit more difficult for me to go for an H3 government form. But here I made the decision to go for the military theory, which just makes me even more threatening. I have a lot of science. It's an easy way to get some additional strength going. It's an easy way to maybe be able to declare war and building some units while still drawing 3 cards. And also, Cogito might just skip it because he has the strategy, and then it's also a very nice card to get for Fjantarik, making him even more safe, and maybe also allowing it that he can more easily go for some wars and aggression against Cogito without a drawback on missing out on some draws. So I do think it makes sense, but maybe I could have also considered setting myself a bit more for a peaceful game, because going for a war against Fjantarik might be quite difficult, also going for an aggression against him. But there's still Cogito. With winning the territory, he has now a bit of a culture lead, so I was hoping that maybe I can actually declare war against him without him resigning immediately. So that is my turn. I will draw 3 cards, and I will actually draw 3 impacts. Impact of colonies at this point is a completely neutral impact. Impact of harmony could have some potential with me now having the ocean liner service going, and impact of strength, of course, could also be very nice for me. Now it's Cogito's turn. He will see it. The event revealed is the economic progress. That helps him out a bit, because now he has the option to actually increase his population, but even without it he could have gone for organized religion in order to fix his happy faces, which he will now do anyway. So he goes for an upgrade, takes the computers, and then plays the patriotism, builds 2 more cavalrymen, is now 29 strength, and who knows, if he has some more defense cards drawn, he at least can threaten to defend against an aggression, which might be important for him. Now it's Fjantarik's turn. He has the option to go for mechanized agriculture instead of selective breeding. A bit unfortunate, or nice for him. I was hoping that maybe he would be a bit more stuck on low food. Just going for 1 selective breeding upgrade would just put him at +1, so he would be stuck on the current amount of population for quite a while, unless he would be willing to destroy something to put it in the second farm. But now with the mechanized agriculture, he can, in 2 turns at least, increase his population again normally. And then with his last 3 civil action, he just takes the air forces, and with that it is of course even more difficult to pull a war or something off against him, because he can just threaten to go for 2 air forces. For my turn, I came to the conclusion that I do want to go for a war here against Cogito. I don't want to commit too much into it. I won't go for an additional army, for example. I will actually just build a cannon, because if I put too much into it, then again there's just the danger that Cogito might resign. So I just wanted to declare war. Ideally, Cogito will not resign, and I will get a bit of culture out of it. and all of those impacts, it's not completely clear yet how nice those will be for me. The armed intervention, there's a chance that Cogito could now defend with him having gone for some additional strength. He has used a lot of defense cards for colonization, so he might still be vulnerable, but I just thought a war could be very nice here. I also considered going for a war with technology, but I was not certain how much that will actually do for me, and I rather wanted to go for the war with culture immediately, even though there's the danger that it could mean that I don't have one later, when maybe Cogito is still a bit vulnerable, and maybe at some point I can go for a war against him without him being able to resign if there's H4. So yeah, I went for a war with culture against Cogito. And then I had a relatively clear turn in mind, but there were two different ways how I could play it, and those two different ways have something to do with the two government forms that are on the row. So this turn I basically had to make a decision on which of those government forms do I want to go for. I do think, especially with having all of my happy faces covered, the time of the Theocracy is over now, and it's time for an H3 government form. My first instinct was to go for the Democracy, because I thought I maybe have some nice ways to set up something peaceful here. I can go for the Democracy, I can go for computers, I can go for Bill Gates. I can't go for computers with Bill Gates already this turn, but at the next turn I can elect Bill Gates and start going for computers. It's then not the earliest Bill Gates any longer, but it still has the potential to be nice for me, get some culture out of Bill Gates at the end, get a lot of additional resource, be nicely prepared for impacts, hopefully be able to build a nice wonder. So I thought that could be quite nice, and then maybe I don't want to commit too heavily into military, and I preferred to have the Democracy, just getting some safe culture reduction, and so that was my first instinct. But the fundamentalism has of course some big advantages here, because I have actually a wall going, so the 6 additional strength could just result in some additional culture gain for me, and actually quite some culture gain. I don't really count a swing against Cogito, because I was very confident that hopefully I will be able to finish before him at the end, and I was mainly counting the culture against Fjantarik, so it's only 6 culture. The Democracy produces me 3 immediately, so that was not the biggest reason, but of course in the short term gives me more culture, maybe also increases the chances though that Cogito might resign during his turn. But there are also some other arguments for it. One argument is that if I don't take the fundamentalism and instead go for Democracy, then Fjantarik might have a chance to go for the fundamentalism, and if he indeed has drawn a strong H3 tactic, then out of the sudden I might be the one who could have some trouble, especially if I might miss out on a second copy of Air Force. Then I do think it could get a bit tricky. Maybe that's not that likely that the danger is looming in the air, but there's definitely the potential. So I was a little bit worried about my military situation if I don't go for the fundamentalism myself. And then one actually relatively big reason to go for the fundamentalism is that if I go for it, and as you can see, it was also the decision at the end to go for the fundamentalism, then after going for Bill Gates, computers, I will rebuild the farm to not have famine, and then I will just build one cannon. I wasn't willing to destroy anything to go for knights. Going for even more strength might just lead to Cogito resigning, and I don't want to destroy anything at this point, so I just went for the wall with 49 strength. It's more than enough to be safe. Cogito should not be able to find any way to defend himself or win the war. And the next turn I have Bill Gates and had the computers, I have enough science and resource to go for 2 upgrades, and then I was hoping that this Bill Gates with computers can still allow myself to catch up in a peaceful way maybe. And one big argument for the fundamentalism is also that thanks to the 2 additional military action compared to the Democracy, I will now get 3 draws instead of only getting 1 draw, which I would have gotten when I went for the Democracy. Still was a close call for me, but with there maybe being the danger of Fjantarik actually using the fundamentalism and maybe being quite threatening, or also maybe just getting military theory instead of fundamentalism, then maybe the additional strength might actually be quite helpful to defend myself in case I want to rather focus on some peaceful stuff. It gives me more strength and it gives me more draws, and for this turn at least it doesn't give me an additional civil action, but it will cost me more science long term. I will have less actions, I don't get a culture per turn. So if there wouldn't be the danger from Fjantarik and the additional cards drawn, I definitely would go for the Democracy here. But at the end I made a decision to go for the fundamentalism, hoping that maybe Cogito wouldn't resign now that I don't go for a 4th army, and then hoping that I will just get some more impact draws, and with Bill Gates will maybe be able to set up nicely for them. So now I was interested to see, will Cogito resign or not? I was happy to see that I draw a second war over culture. That could be important, because if Cogito stays in the game, then it could be nice to maybe, as said, go for a war very late when he maybe doesn't have the possibility to resign any longer, and then still have the chance to get a lot of culture out of it. Also, I draw the impact of population, which I was happy about, so the additional draws out of the fundamentalism are being nice immediately, because the impact of population with me having the ocean liner service might actually be quite a bit bigger than for my opponents, even though sadly Fjantarik is able to win this inhabited territory for just a unit, so that of course improves this impact immediately for him. Cogito goes for the tanks, plays the revolutionary idea, takes it my own hand. Interestingly, there's also Gandhi, but I have not that many military actions that Gandhi doesn't make him that safe anyway, so he just rather wants to have a leader that has a lot of potential instead of going for Gandhi, who doesn't really make him that safe anyway. He goes for tanks, going up to 36 strength, meaning I am actually able to steal at least a bit of culture from him, but not enough to overtake any of my opponents yet, so Cogito makes the decision to stay in the game, which I think is very reasonable. Fjantarik this turn rebuilds his military, actually builds that much that he is now at 49 strength, takes the democracy, the revolutionary idea, and the satellites. Now it is my turn, and I again have to think about what do I want to do. During my politics phase, an aggression is definitely not guaranteed to succeed, and I thought it's very important that I use my my politics actions very precisely, as I might need to get some nice value out of them in order to overcome the culture gap to Fjantarik that is still there, even after I will now steal some culture out of the war, because I'm still also sitting in 0 culture production. So I didn't want to play the armed intervention with there being the danger of it just being blocked, especially because it only gives me +7 culture against Fjantarik anyway, and that is an amount that impacts like impact of population and maybe also impact of harmony could be achieving for me as well. The big question is, do I maybe want to go for another war immediately? A war with culture could be interesting. Cogito can't really go for a lot of strength. There might be some events that could help him, but I think one of those was actually still mine. Was there still an event from me in the deck? I'm not completely certain about it. But there could be one unknown event, but even with help, he can't go for that much strength, and I will actually build a knight this turn anyway, so I could just go for a war already. But I wanted to keep this war in hand for now, and maybe have the option to get more culture out of a war later on when there is H4. Maybe there's still a case for going for the war, because if Cogito resigns, at least then Fjantarik also doesn't have the chance to maybe get some value out of declaring a war later on. So I also removed this possibility from him. And if Cogito doesn't resign, then maybe at least I still get a nice amount of culture out of the war. I considered going for the war of attack, but I thought at this point it's more important to get some culture out of the war instead of just some additional signs. So at the end I went for seeding here. But I think it definitely could be justified to maybe also just go for the war over culture now, because who knows what happens. Maybe it's nice to actually make Cogito resign now and take out the possibility from Fjantarik, who has air forces, while I don't have air forces. Also, if Cogito should resign, it would also mean that I'm guaranteed to get a second copy of air forces, while now it could be taken away by Cogito, which could mean that maybe there could be the chance with the military theory being revealed that I actually could be a bit in danger. So I think maybe it could have been a nice decision to go for the war here. Instead, I made a decision to go for the impact of population, which at this point looked like maybe it will, even after Fjantarik went for Meg Egg and has the inhabited territory, could still be quite a strong impact. And then with the war, I'm actually now at relatively level on culture. With Cogito, I see the impact of population into the deck. The iconoclasm is revealed, interestingly. All H2 leaders are lost. James Watt is gone, Catherine is gone, Nobel is gone. Losing Nobel is not that bad. I would have gone for Bill Gates this turn anyway. The one thing that happens though is that there are no Nobel prizes in the game. How bad it is for me, it has to be seen. I don't have a lot of science saved up. The other players could also maybe easily go for some Nobel prizes, so I was not too unhappy about losing the Nobel prize, but of course with going for Bill Gates with computers, there's at least a chance to get some Nobel prizes, maybe in my last turn, maybe also in 2 turns, but probably only 1. I will use the ocean liner service this turn, and then I will indeed go for Bill Gates. I will go for 2 computers upgrades. I don't have enough resource to build a computer and go for an upgrade, otherwise I might have considered it. Now instead I will go for 2 upgrades, and I will, after taking the endowment, which I thought could just be a very nice way for me to maybe get 6 additional culture going potentially. There were some different cards that I considered. One of those cards are one of those copies of multimedia. If I don't take one now, there's only 1 copy of movies left. There is, however, a chance I will take the Engineering Genius, but even with taking the Engineering Genius, there is still a chance that those might still be around for me, because Cogito can't take Chaplain. He might definitely take the Civil Service, which is also a card that I heavily considered for myself. But the Civil Service could just could be taken by Cogito. Then one of the multimedias would be in a discard spot on Fjantarik's turn, and then if he takes the other copy, those might be gone, and there's only one copy of movies left. But maybe the next thing that I want to build is a third computer anyway, then at some point there might be movies available, and I wasn't willing to pay 2 civil actions for the multimedia here, especially because I might still have a shot at getting one copy at the next turn anyway. And also if I don't take the Engineering Genius here or the endowment I thought could be quite valuable. I could of course also just take Engineering Genius and multimedia, but if I don't take the Engineering Genius, then it could be a bit tricky to go for multiple multimedias and then maybe also a wonder. So I also really wanted to have the 5 additional resources out of the Engineering Genius. I heavily considered the Civil Service, but I'm missing 1 science to go for it at the next turn. If I would have enough science to go for it at the next turn, I would have considered it more. But like this, and also not having an impact for it in hand, I made the decision to not go for it, and instead take the endowment, the Engineering Genius. I will build an additional knight, making myself the strongest again for potential strength events, and also making it more likely to maybe pull off an aggression against Cogito if I want to. And then I take the rockets, which could just be a cheap technology to develop. It's also a very efficient way to get some additional strength going, because military actions are not that much of a limiting factor for me, and then just upgrading all of those cannons to rockets would, for example, give me 8 strength for 8 resources, which is a very good deal. And it's also a cheap technology. One of the wonders that I could be getting is the space flight. Maybe there's still a chance to get impact of technology, and so I thought having the rockets in hand is not that bad. And I liked it more than the modern infantry, because I think going for something like positional army is just way too costly, and just upgrading those cannons to rockets might be a way more efficient way to get more strength than just maybe building more mobile artillery tactics. So that was this turn. I'm now at least at 38 culture. There's also the computers built already, which put me at 44 culture, so I'm not that much behind Fjantarik any longer. I have already a strong impact in. Might still have the possibility to go for war, for aggressions, maybe some more nice impact. So I thought I have actually a decent position and could transform this into a win, even though I maybe can't war Fjantarik. I do draw some cards. Another war, so maybe now at the next turn I can actually just declare war against Cogito if he doesn't find a way to make himself safe, without having to worry about not having a war left later on. And the impacts are not that nice for me, but for the impact of culture it's at least maybe nice to know that my opponents don't have it, and who knows, maybe if I get movies or something, there could still be a way to play towards that impact. Cogito goes for 1 upgrades to computers, doesn't go for Sid Meier now, and is willing to pay 3 civil actions for the air forces. And yeah, with that, of course, he's a bit safer. Not that much, because he's missing science to develop the air force at his next turn. So with the amount of resource that he's having, he can't that easily go for enough strength. So I was thinking at the next turn it's maybe time to go to war again. And I don't maybe need to build that much. Maybe I can just actually go for rockets and for some upgrades. And no, but I was also a bit worried by the second copy of Air Force taken, because I was still a bit afraid that maybe Fjantarik can do some stuff. For example, now the military theory is coming down the road, and if Fjantarik wants to, he can maybe play the revolutionary idea, take it, develop it, destroy some stuff, build 2 riflemen, reveal the modern army tactic, and that could already really cause some issues for me. I think I would not be able to defend against something like this, so I was very worried about the Air Force being taken away. Of course, for my next turn, the Air Force also wouldn't have helped me, and also me going for this Bill Gates line was a bit risky, with there maybe being a chance that Fjantarik can go for something like that. But I have drawn some wars. Fjantarik didn't have that many draws, and maybe I just have to also take some risks, and maybe Fjantarik would still rather go for a war against Cogito. But if he has actually the modern army tactic drawn, it could get dangerous. But it is of course definitely not a given that he has both a war and this tactic drawn, and just with Napoleonic armies I think I should maybe manage to defend myself. Now Cogito ends his turn, and now there's something interesting happening, because Fjantarik will actually offer the loss of sovereignty against Cogito, making it impossible to declare war against him, which I was a bit worried about, because I have those 2 wars in hand and could maybe exploit Cogito's weak military situation a bit longer. But that is now no longer possible for both me and Fjantarik, maybe indicating that Fjantarik himself doesn't have a nice way to go for some wars or aggressions against Cogito, or maybe he doesn't want to do it, and with that, this possibility is shut down for both of us, and Fjantarik is getting some additional culture out of it, so I was a bit worried about this, as now I definitely have to rely completely on peaceful options in order to close the culture gap to Fjantarik. At least the positive thing is that Fjantarik also now can't go for aggressions against Cogito, while I still can go for aggressions, so that's at least a downside for him and maybe makes a bit up for him not being, for him getting the additional culture out of it. Fjantarik, also I think it makes sense for Cogito to take the Air Force, because one way how he can maybe come back into the game, and of course at the moment he has still more culture than me, so he's still in the game, but I think I have maybe some nice ways to just get some points from impacts and stuff. But one thing that you maybe could hope towards is that Fjantarik has actually something like Modern Army in a war. And I was really worried, because if Fjantarik now goes for this Air Force, maybe develops military theory, doesn't take too many cards, so that there is likely another turn in H3, without Air Force just wouldn't be able to find a nice way to defend against it, to threaten enough defense. The copies of tanks are gone, so I can't easily threaten a mechanized army tactic. Building more mobile artillery tactics would require a lot of population. I would need to destroy a lot of stuff. So for this turn I was really worried about if what Fjantarik would be doing, because if he goes for the military theory and builds up some military, I could be really in trouble, and who knows, maybe even be at the risk of losing this game if Fjantarik has the right cards in hand. So I was worried to see this Air Force build. It could be an indicator of him going for a military push. He also goes for Churchill, elects him, but I was very relieved to see him not taking the military theory. Instead he will go for the reserves and play the revolutionary idea, and with that the second copy of military theory is gone, and that basically takes all the threat of a war away from me. And maybe it could be worth it for Fjantarik to take this military theory, even if he doesn't have the right cards, because first of all he could still draw them and also to put some real pressure on me. On the other hand, maybe he really needs the copy of reserves, so it's a bit of a tough decision to make. The military theory could be nice for impacts though, so I thought maybe it could be worth it for him, but if he just doesn't have the cards for it, then I think it also of course makes sense to not go for the military theory. But I was definitely very relieved, and then again was more confident in my position. I thought that I should be at basically almost no danger at losing the game, and I was hoping that I maybe find some ways with impacts and at least maybe aggressions, now that I can't go for wars, to maybe still win the game. But with having no ability to declare war now, it could definitely be getting a bit more problematic. I see that the impact of Harmony into the deck. Soon I might need to build a third farm anyway. I can disband this warrior, maybe build some more urban buildings, and I thought a Harmony of 20 is easily achievable for me, while Fjantarik has at the moment still 3 workers in farms and mines plus in urban buildings, so it could be a +8 culture impact against him maybe, and with that I went for this impact, as I also get a 3 culture for seeding instead of going for this armed intervention against Cogito. The event revealed is actually the refugees. I was not happy to see that. Sadly, Fjantarik is able to win it. If it would have been revealed one event earlier instead of the iconoclasm, I would have been able to win it, and with the impact of population, I do think it's quite a bit of a swing whether I or Fjantarik win it, but Fjantarik put some effort into being strongest and now gets rewarded for it. And with the impact of population, sadly, that means quite some additional culture, maybe also more population to work towards the impact of harmony. And yeah, then the event deck is flipped. I have 2 impacts already in there with the impact of population and impact of harmony. And in this turn there's one card in the row that I think I just have to take, and that is the space flight. It won't be a very big space flight, but a very decent one, probably at the high 20s, and that should be strong enough, and I just didn't want to go for any of the other wonders, as it also might be a very decent wonder for maybe Cogito or Fjantarik. I was of course mainly worried about Fjantarik, not that much about Cogito at this point. So I took the space flight, and then I will just build an additional computers, allowing me to maybe make the space flight even bigger. It will be nice with Bill Gates, I will have even more resources, will be able to build even more stuff. And then I have 1 civil action left. And here I considered some different things, and it mainly was a decision whether I do want to commit to the multimedia, or if I maybe rather want to hope to get the last copy of movies. And I thought that it might be nicer for me to go for the movies, because as soon as I will lose the 2 yellow tokens to the end of the age, and the age might actually already end before my next turn, and then I might need happy faces, and I can't really build a multimedia easily anyway, and then just having movies might be a lot better. So I thought about maybe I just take the reserves. I could also take the revolutionary idea, but probably I have enough science to work with likely getting 2 more productions, as Cogito can't end the age during his turn. So I more consider the reserves. It could maybe allow me to build just more urban buildings. And who knows, maybe Fjantarik could somehow try to see, maybe also has to think about what one he wants to go for. Maybe the red cross could be interesting, especially if I should stay on 0 food. So the reserves maybe could also allow myself to play it for food and build a step of the red cross instead of missing completely out on it. So I heavily considered the reserves. At the end I actually went with the multimedia, and one reason for that is that I'm actually very, very tight on civil actions. I will have 2 turns left, but still, even with being on 7 civil actions, I have a lot of stuff to do. 4 civil actions will go into the space flight. Then I will now take the multimedia. So 3 civil actions will go into developing those 3 technologies. That's already 7, that's already 1 whole turn. Then I have enough science to even go for a 4th technology, which maybe should be worth it, which would require myself to get even 2 more civil actions for taking and developing it. I want to play the endowment, I maybe want to build an urban building, I want to build an additional farm for the impact of harmony and to fix my famine issues, I maybe have to build a team sports, and then basically all of my actions are almost already used up. So taking and playing the reserves is maybe an amount of actions that I just can't allow myself, and also potentially having to grab the movies for an additional civil action in addition to having the reserves might just cause a civil action overload for me for my last 2 turns, which is why at the end took the multimedia. Another advantage of that is that I slow down the card draw, increasing my chances to maybe actually get 1 more turn in age 3, which could allow myself to maybe get 1 more draws, and that could be very valuable, as some impacts could be quite strong for me with having Bill Gates, like impact of science, architecture and some stuff. So I thought with that a multimedia should hopefully be a fine pick instead of the reserves, but especially the red cross now could be a better wonder for Fjantarik, as I don't have the chance to build any step, and he might be able to set himself up for it to at least get 4 steps out of it, which then gives him 24 culture against him, plus actually 4 colonies that are in game at the moment, so it would be a 28 culture wonder for him against me, which I was a bit worried about. Sadly, I don't draw another impact. I draw 2 colonization cards, but maybe I don't need those too much, or maybe I could still use them, because if now Fjantarik would go for an aggression, I would have to discard a lot of cards. Now I'm a bit safer in that regard. Cogito seeds, the event revealed is the immigration, no one loses any workers. He will increase his population, builds another lab, takes the reserves, will elect Sid Meier, going up to 6 culture production, and takes the revolutionary idea. When we take a look at the culture at the end of his turn, we can see that I'm behind. Maybe I will be able to play the endowment for 6 culture potentially. Fjantarik still has a bit of a lead, but I will get a Bill Gates culture, I will get a spaceflight culture. So I was actually relatively confident, also because I have 2 at least decent impacts already in there, which maybe will give something like +4, +6, +8 against Fjantarik each. So I was thinking I have actually a decent position here and maybe decent chances to win the game. Now it's Fjantarik's turn. He will see it. The vast territory is revealed. Fjantarik actually doesn't bid for it at all, interestingly, and at the end Cogito is able to win it. I actually only bid a warrior in 1 card, as I thought that maybe there's a chance that the age actually won't end, and if I build a warrior in both of the cards, then I'm at 53 strength, meaning I would need to rebuild some strength in order to be safe from an aggression from Fjantarik. I might need to build a team spot at some point anyway, but if I win the colony, it's actually unnecessary to build a team spots, and if the age doesn't end, it's also unnecessary to build a team spots already at the next turn, and instead it could be a lot nicer to build a multimedia. So with that, I was only willing to bid a warrior in 1 card. And Cogito is at the end able to win it. At least he has to send a colonization card away and is now quite low in strength, maybe opening up the possibility to play an aggression against him. Fjantarik will go for the democracy. upgrades, no, actually builds an additional mechanized agriculture with the population that he got out of the refugees, and then he will indeed go for the Red Cross, takes 1 copy of reserves, and at the next turn will be able to build as many steps as he wants to, and I sadly don't have the option to build one of the steps, so as said, that will give him now, with an additional colony being revealed, even 29 culture against me, and with that he will match my space flight. He has culture production this turn, at the next turn, so after I was confident, now I was again a bit worried, but I was hoping that I maybe still also have some ways to generate some culture here. Again, back to my politics phase, I had to think about, do I want to push an impact or maybe try an armed intervention, which at this point should be very, very likely successful against Cogito. And I have some impacts that could be interesting, especially impact of strength. But it's actually not that easily possible to pull off the impact of strength. We will see this when I talk about my turn. I had really some trouble figuring out a way how I can do some nice stuff this turn while still being able to build up enough strength for the impact of strength at the next turn, especially also if you remember how tight my civil actions are. And the other impacts are just not that great. And also impact of harmony and population will both get improved during my turn. Population actually not really, because while I do get a population from the ocean liner, after my turn I will also have an unhappy worker because I don't build any additional happy phase buildings. So, but the impact of harmony would get improved, and so at the end I just went for the armed intervention to at least get 7 culture, but it's actually not that great of an aggression, because this turn I will actually play the endowment, which at the moment would give me 6 culture, but as soon as I go for the armed intervention it will only give me 3, and as I'm mainly looking for points against Fjantarik, this armed intervention basically only gives me 4 points, which is not really that great, and I thought maybe I should just commit to the impact of strength here, but as we will see during my turn, it's really not that easy to make sure that I'm able to win it. And not even make it easily possible to overtake Fjantarik in strength, so I at the end went for the aggression here, even though I didn't like it too much. I will use the ocean liner service to increase my population. And here was one turn that I really wanted to go towards. I want to build one urban building, the multimedia. As you can see, the movies are actually the last card in the deck, so it's nice that I now have the option to build a multimedia instead of a movie. So ideally I want to build one multimedia, I wanted to spend this warrior, build an additional farm, being prepared for the impact of harmony. I need to build this farm soon anyway because of famine issues, and then after doing that I can just do some stuff and prepare to finish the space flight and get as much points as at the next turn as possible. And I at the end also went for this, but I definitely considered going for some other lines, which would maybe leave myself better prepared for the impact of strength. For example, I could build a computer instead of the multimedia. Maybe I should have done it. But building the multimedia is just also nice for some impacts. It gives me 3 culture at the next turn. The computer will only give me 3 culture once with Bill Gates. And there could be something like impact of balance, impact of variety, where the multimedia just scores me some additional points while the computers aren't. So that could be an idea to build a computer instead of the multimedia to have more resources, which will be one limiting factor for me at the next turn in order to achieve more strength. And but at the end I wasn't willing to do it. I could also not build any building, maybe just team sports, could give me some points if the impact of population is revealed before my next turn, and then I'm a bit more flexible. But ideally I want to build a multimedia anyway, and if I'm not building it now I'm just delaying it, but at least I would know whether I actually need some additional resource for the impact of strength to work or not. At the end, I made a decision to just go with the multimedia turn, as there is at least some hope that I can still pull off the impact of strength. I will first of all take the mechanized agriculture, getting one last technology for the spaceflight. I didn't really plan in to go for any upgrade. I thought about it, but I want to build maybe an additional farm for the impact of harmony anyway, and then there isn't really that much of a point to go for more upgrades. It would be nice for impact of agriculture, but actually not for impact of balance, as I am not able to go for that much culture production. Then, as you can see, I will go for the multimedia, I will go for the spending this warrior to build an additional farm, and then I have still 3 civil actions left. I made a decision to develop the military theory, as I want to develop that anyway, and there's one unknown impact, which could be impact of government or impact of progress. Now I have 2 civil actions left, and now as you can see, I can at the next turn finish the space flight with the engineering genius, meaning I still have 10 resources left after finishing the space flight, which is not bad. But I kind of need to build a team sports because I have a big uprising issue, and if I build a team sport, at least it's also giving me strength, so I would beat 59 strength with the team sports, but with then 5 resource left, I'm only able to go for 2 upgrades from cannons to rockets, which would then put me at 63 strength, and as you can see, that's actually more than Fjantarik has at the moment. However, there's definitely a chance that Fjantarik during his turn might actually go for the satellites for 3 additional strength, and then he's at 64, so just 1 more than I would be able to muster at my next turn. There's, however, another way to get some additional resources, and that is with the reserves. With the reserves, I could take them now and play them, and then I would have enough resource to go for enough cannons to rockets upgrades so that Fjantarik can't be stronger than me just by developing the satellites. The problem again being that I actually don't have enough civil actions to take and play the reserves, as I already said at the turn before. I have the 1 free civil action that I could use to take the reserves, but I don't have a free civil action to play it. I could of course miss out on some stuff. I will now play the endowment for 3 culture. I could have missed out on that, and then maybe have the possibility to play the impact of strength into the deck, and I think maybe I actually should have done that, just to stay a bit more flexible. So at the end I made a decision to build 1 step. I can't build a 2nd step, as that would cause corruption, otherwise maybe I would not play the endowment right now, as maybe there's at least a chance that Cogito could still overtake me in strength towards my next turn, but then at the end I will just go for playing it now. And maybe it's a mistake that I'm doing here, because I at the end thought I will just go with this play. Either maybe Fjantarik doesn't go for satellites, for example, he can maybe also take movies and build one, maybe he will disband a unit to build up some urban buildings and stuff and get weaker anyway, and so maybe it doesn't actually matter the reserves. And there's also a chance that I will just draw a different impact that maybe might be worth as much as the impact of strength. There are definitely some available that would achieve that, and so I thought maybe one of those things will happen, and then I just have 1 more free civil action at the next turn, and there are some ways how I could use this additional civil action. For example, if the impact of harmony isn't revealed yet, the additional civil action might be used to I could maybe use it to build an additional farm after disbanding a unit, which I don't want to do if I see the impact of strength, but if that isn't possible, that could maybe be something to do with an additional civil action. If I spend now 1 civil action to take the reserves, I don't have enough civil actions left to play it. But on the other hand, it could be nice to at least have the option to see the impact of strength for certain, and if I don't need to play the reserves, then I can still not play it and still do all of the things. So I think it might maybe at the end actually be a mistake to not have taken the reserves, but at the end it will actually turn out somewhat fine in hindsight, and maybe so it was the right decision. But sadly, as you can see, I don't draw a very strong impact of agriculture. It is at least nice to have knowledge about that it isn't in the deck. I draw an aggression that I maybe can use against Cogito, but I don't draw any other impact, so let's see if I at the next turn will indeed have the chance to see the impact of strength or not. H4 starts. Cogito will go for the democracy, develops it, goes for some additional culture production, builds the step of the red cross, goes for the efficient upgrade and the reserves, and also goes for an additional upgrade to tanks, as we can see at the end of his turn. He is at the same amount of culture as I am. Fjantarik has a bit of a lead, will now get the red cross, seeds during his turn. But I was happy to see the event revealed. It's the impact of progress, so the 1 unknown event, and it actually gives me +6 against Fjantarik, which I was very happy to see, so developing the military theory at the last turn was very important. Fjantarik this turn will finish the red cross with the impact of progress out. I was really hoping that maybe he won't develop the satellites, allowing myself to go for the impact of strength. And but then sadly he will during his turn just go for an additional organized religion, preparing for potential impact of happiness, and also developing the satellites, going up to 64 strength, and also helping still for development of technology, impact of technology and impact of variety. And with that, and with me not having taken the reserves, if I want to finish the space flight, there's just not really any way. If I also want to build a team sport, I could destroy a bunch of stuff, build another army, but that might just not be worth it. And so I can't really go towards the impact of strength. So maybe I should have taken the reserves, then I at least would now have the option to go for playing it for resources, maybe not play the endowment, miss out on 3 culture, but having the ability to play the impact of strength. However, even if I would have done it, I maybe would have regretted it, because I do think, even though I can't see any impact, and the Occupy doesn't help me that much, it will only the culture will be relevant that I steal from Cogito, the other things won't. So it's basically only 3 culture against Fjantarik, but I do think it's still better than having the reserves in hand and then missing out on 3 culture from the endowment to be able to play the impact of strength now, and that is because I can actually improve both of the impacts during this turn, and at least I get the 3 culture from the Occupy. So basically, we can maybe take a look at a turn. I will get the 3 culture from the Occupy and also some other stuff, but it all won't be relevant, at least for me. Maybe it will make Cogito's turn a bit weaker, but I wasn't too much concerned about that. I will go for the ocean liner service. I developed the 2 technologies. I will finish the space flight, and then I will build the arena. I will disband something and build an additional farm. And now I have a harmony of 24. I have built those happy phases, so the impact of population has gotten better, so I have improved both of those impacts by +4 during this turn, I think, compared to how they were during my politics phase. So if I would have seeded the impact of strength, I would have gotten 3 for seeding and +7 against Fjantarik if I would have taken the reserves. But then I would have lost 4 culture on one of the impacts, and so that's already 4 that I miss out on. And if I would be lucky, the impact of harmony would be revealed, because that one I wouldn't improve during my turn anyway. But if the impact of population is revealed too early, then I lose 4 culture for the impact of population because it's revealed too early, and 4 culture for the impact of harmony, because if I go for the impact of strength, I can't go for improving my harmony, I think. Or could I? No, I can't, because I have to keep those units. So I would potentially miss 4 or 8 culture out on the impacts. I would miss out on the 3 culture from the Occupy, and I would miss out on the 3 culture from playing the endowment. And that altogether would just be too much. I would miss out on 10 culture for certain, and I would miss all it. No, on 10 culture for certain, and potentially in 14 culture, and I would only get 10 culture for the culture for seeding this +7 against Fjantarik. So at the end it was actually a good decision to pass in the reserves. So maybe it was also at the turn before, but at this point I didn't know if maybe some of those impacts are already out, and then it could have been very important to be able to go for the impact of strength, but at least I had a chance to also draw another impact, and so I went for the Occupy. But I was a bit worried at this point that maybe it's just not enough what I'm having here. Now at this point of my turn, I still have one decision that I have to make, because I can either now just upgrade 2 rockets, preparing for a potential impact of competition, or I can actually disband a knight and build a warrior and upgrade 1 cannon to rocket, and not improve the impact of competition. It would stay the same. I would upgrade a rocket but disband a knight, but I would improve my variety by +2. So either I can improve the impact of competition or the variety by +2. And at this point I did some calculations. I will now at the end of my turn be at 104 culture. I will get a Bill Gates bonus for +9, then I will be at 113. Impact of harmony will be +8 against Fjantarik. Sadly he improved it during his turn, but my harmony is now 24. So with that, with another +8 I would be at 121 if we just count the difference basically. And then the impact of population gives me +6 against Fjantarik, and with that I would be at 127. So 7 culture against Fjantarik. I'm 7 culture behind Fjantarik before the unknown impacts are revealed. And with that I didn't have a lot of hope, but I definitely still had hopes, because 2 of the impacts are seeded by Fjantarik and 1 by Cogito. I thought about which impacts could be in there. One really bad one would be the impact of balance, and sadly that one could have potentially been seeded by both opponents. I was quite afraid of that impact. At least impact of culture, for example, can't be in the deck. And I was just hoping that maybe the impacts of Fjantarik are relatively neutral ones. There are quite a bunch of ones that are relatively neutral, and that then the impact of Cogito is maybe a nice impact. Impact of architecture is better for me. Impact of government is actually quite a bit better for me. And there are also some other impacts. Impact of technology. Checkpot would of course be impact of science, but it is maybe not likely to be seeded by Cogito. And of course there's a chance that Cogito will seed another impacts. And if there are 2 impacts by him, maybe it gets more realistic that maybe those 2 impacts could be ones that are nice for me against Fjantarik. So I had a bit of hope, but I'm 7 points behind. Then the unknown impacts are coming, so I was worried, especially with maybe the impact of balance potentially coming, that it might not be enough at the end to finish at the first place here. But let's see what those impacts will be. And I forgot about this, of course. I at the end made a decision to prepare for the impact of variety. If I prepare for the impact of variety, that's a neutral impact, giving +0 for Fjantarik against me. If I prepare for the impact of competition, then that's giving Fjantarik still +1 against me. And as I maybe need to hope towards some ideal impacts anyway, I thought maybe I should rather prepare for the impact that is then just better for me, instead of the one that would still be -1. So I went for the warrior and 1 upgrade to rockets. Cogito sadly doesn't see it, so now maybe the 1 impact from him has to be one that will be nice for me. He will go for the movies this turn, plays the reserves and builds 1, and also goes for an upgrade, so maybe he could have definitely seeded impact of architecture or something like this. And now before the final impacts, there are quite some culture differences, but I will get a Bill Gates bonus. I have 2 at least decent impacts in there, so let's see what the final impacts will have to say. First one is the impact of variety, which I was relatively happy to see. First of all, it meant that I prepared for the right impact, and second of all, if that is one of the neutral impacts that I was hoping towards, that might have been seeded by Fjantarik, that could definitely be good news. The next impact, however, I was very sad to see, because now that makes it really difficult for me to catch up. The impact of balance isn't indeed in there. It's nice for both opponents, so it was of course likely that it is in there, sadly. There is the impact of population, so one of mine impacts, where I catch up +6 to Fjantarik. Then there's the impact of harmony, where I catch up +8 to Fjantarik. But now there's only 1 impact left. I'm still quite behind. There is at this point only 1 impact that could save me, where maybe there's a small hope that it could be in there, and that is the impact of science, because with the Bill Gates bonus I'm getting +9, with the impact of science +14, so that's +23, and then I would finish just 1 tiny point before Fjantarik, and maybe Cogito at some point, with taking some risk, could have seeded it earlier on. I was not really having a lot of hope towards that impact being revealed, but who knows, maybe it could be revealed. But sadly the impact, the last one, is the impact of competition, so at the end it didn't really make a difference whether I prepared for impact of competition or variety, as both of them were in there. And with that, sadly, even with the Bill Gates bonus, Fjantarik is at the end able to win this game, while I finished at the 2nd position. Yeah, so congratulations to Fjantarik, quite an intense game, I think. And yeah, a game where I early on went for maybe a bit more of an unusual game. I mean, sometimes I definitely go for some military games. I think it's important to not be blindsided towards that strategy. And this time I really went quite heavily into it, especially when I then went for the Theocracy. For Barbarossa, I was able to win a lot of strength events, and then it really hit off when I drew the mobile artillery tactic and the war over territory, which was a bit lucky, but I also had some draws during H2, so there were some chances to maybe see those cards, but I also had the politics of strength, so I think I had mostly quite good draws this game. And then yeah, I was maybe a bit lucky that I didn't have the chance to go for the Republic during that 1 turn before I had drawn the mobile artillery tactic, but with having that drawn I wanted to stay more military heavy, and then there was some big military push. I declared a war against Cogito. Cogito got really hit very heavily by wars, didn't have a nice way available to defend himself, and then I also declared war against Fjantarik. hoping that maybe I can lock him down on low population, which sadly was a bit mitigated by the fact that he got the mechanized agriculture and the inhabited territory too. So at the end he had a decent amount of population, also got the refugees, which maybe if I would have won them could have made things a bit closer. Who knows if Fjantarik would have gone for the harmony of 16, he would have gotten 5 culture less for the impact of with the culture from refugees and cultural impact of population, while I would have gotten +5. So who knows, maybe if that could have made a bit of a difference, probably it would still be enough for Fjantarik, but maybe quite a bit closer. And yeah, but at the end, Fjantarik shut down the possibility of further wars for me. Maybe didn't have some available for himself with the loss of sovereignty, got a bit of culture for himself out of it. At least couldn't go for more aggressions. I could go for some aggressions against Cogito, but then with the Red Cross being a similarly strong wonder for him as far as my space flight, I at the end just wasn't able to catch up in points, and Fjantarik manages to win this game. Yeah, so definitely an interesting game. I hope you enjoyed it. We can now also take a look at the standings, which are actually quite close at the moment. With being able to win the game that we just saw, Fjantarik is now actually in the lead with 10 points, but he has also already 4 games finished, so maybe he still doesn't have the best position. I and Gandhin have both 3 games finished and 9 points, so I think between the top 3 it's very, very close. Cogito is now a bit behind. He is on 6 points, has 4 games finished. So he is in a more of a tough spot, but as the group in general is relatively close, if he just gets a lot of wins in his remaining 4 games, he also definitely has still chances to win the group and advance to the upper bracket of the next stage. So quite an exciting group so far. Sadly I wasn't able to win the last game, then of course I would be now on top of the group in a very nice position, but I think I still have a very decent position. I just need to score some nice points in those coming 3 and 2 player games and could have good chances to move on to the upper bracket of the next stage. So I hope you're looking forward towards how those games will be going. I hope it was an interesting game for you to watch. And then, thanks for watching and see you in the next video.